Hey superstars, welcome to the Get Rich Without Being a Bitch podcast. I am Vanessa Shaw, your host for the journey that we're about to embark upon. Listen, if you're in business for yourself, you want to enjoy financial empowerment, live life on your terms, and frankly, live a much richer life, you are going to be in the right place because we are going to be challenging stereotypes, breaking through glass ceilings, giving you the tips, tools, and strategies that can help you be a better version of you, build life and business on your terms. So be sure to subscribe because you are not going to want to miss an episode. Go to your favorite podcast platforms on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe now. And I can't wait to start the journey with you. 5 things that get in the way when you start to make a change to live richly. Hey, superstars, welcome back. I told you I'm going to keep things real. And declaring that you want life to be different and business to be different is not enough. There are going to be things that get in the way. And the good news is a lot of these things are actually within your control. The bad news is perhaps you haven't been aware of them up until now. And I want to get them in a nice little checklist for you so that you've got something that can be a tool for if you hit some stumbling blocks, you can start to see what's coming up. So let's go. Number 1. First thing that gets in the way, number 1 thing that women report is fear. And I want to normalize this for you. I actually was giving a training class yesterday for some amazing women attorneys, really smart women, right? Most of us consider attorneys and doctors really up there in terms of smarts. And when I asked them the question of what was getting in the way, the large majority of them said fear, right? The fear of change. The what if I fail? What if I say I want to do something and I fail? That's often called the fear of failure. The other side of fear can be the fear of success. Oh my gosh, what if I decide to do this thing and it just becomes so big and so overwhelming? And it's like, I feel like I can't handle it. The fear of success. So fear comes up the minute we start to declare that we want to change. It's normal that the fears are going to come up. But I want to give you a slightly different retake on fear. First, I think it's sometimes too easy, frankly, to think about this through the lens of the fear of failure. Oh my gosh, or the fear of success. Also, oh my gosh, what if I can't handle it? I think there's some nuances in there, certainly been my experience, and I want to share these with you. There were 2 things that came up for me. Number 1 was actually not the fear of failure per se, but the fear of judgment. What if I say that I want to do this thing, that I declare that I'm going to do this thing, and then I don't follow through, or it's not as successful as I had intended it to be, right? This perceived failure. I started to realize that really what was going on was the sort of mysterious voices. I was fearing that I was going to be judged. Often they were nameless. They didn't even have faces to them, but just there's some kind of judgment out there. And that was a fear that was holding me back. So it might be the case for you as well. The other side of it as well, for me, this has been an ongoing journey. I'm going to say I'm not entirely at peace with this one. I've made a lot of progress. But for me, it was the fear of disappointment. The fear of, oh my gosh, what if I really declare that thing that I want to do and it doesn't work out and then I have to sit with disappointment? Disappointment has been an emotion that I've had an interesting relationship with over the years. It was something that actually my mom used to say to me as a child because I had that passion and enthusiasm and energy and I would declare things as you do as a kid, right? And my mom didn't realize that she was trying to protect me. I know that she was coming from a really good place, but she would actually say the words, "Be careful, darling, you might get disappointed. Be careful what you ask for. You'll risk disappointment." So she was really projecting her own relationship with disappointment, right, onto me. And it started to hold me back. I feared that it was something that was like really awful. And let's face it, we've probably all had that experience in our lives, and it does not feel pleasant at all. It kind of can feel really icky, right? Like a searingness to it. And so for me, I realized that it wasn't so much the fear of failure, but the fear of judgment and the fear of disappointment. But those are the first ones that are going to come up for you whenever you declare that you're going to change. And it's normal. It is part of the change process. The second thing that will typically come up is some other kind of emotion. So again, I'm going to share with you the ones that I hear the most often. Overwhelm. I hear this from women all the time. This sense of overwhelm, this sense of I'm already doing so much. I'm already at a point in my business where I'm incredibly busy and I'm probably running in too many directions. I feel like I've got too many responsibilities. And the thought of actually wanting to grow it further, right, and do these things that on the surface sound good just fills me with overwhelm and that sense of stress. So there's often that other emotion, right, that can come into play. Now, overwhelm can also come from a place of, I just don't even know where to begin. Like, I want this, but where do I actually start in terms of piecing this all together? So be prepared that there can be this, an emotional reaction to change on different levels. The third thing that is most definitely going to come up for you, and you want to tune into this for yourself, are your own limiting beliefs. Now, sometimes I say you have to tune into them because you might not be aware of them initially. Sometimes people are really attuned to how they're feeling, but they're not so attuned to what they're thinking. But again, those limiting beliefs are sneaky, frankly, and they can be difficult to pin down. They are often the assumptions that you make about something, right? So they are negative. So let's imagine that, I'll just give you an example of this. Let's imagine that you've set a goal that you really want to double your business, and it makes sense and you're very clear on why you want to do that. So you've kind of done some of that groundwork. But then underneath, right, you've got the fear, you've got the overwhelm that you're dealing with, and then underneath it all, you actually have a belief, an assumption that it is simply not possible, right? Nobody can double their business, or I can't double my business in the space of a year, right? That's a limiting belief. So you want to tune into what those things are that are coming up for you and start to challenge them. Oftentimes we just haven't challenged them, and so they remain as these assumptions and truth in our head, and we don't realize that they keep holding us back. And the more aware we can become of like these scripts and stories that are playing out, the more we can start to reframe them, right? Create ones that are more empowering and move ahead. The next place, and again, this one sounds obvious, but again, perhaps you've, walked past this one and not realized it. But are your habits, like we're all creatures of habits, are your habits in alignment with the goals that you want to achieve? Or do you really need to start to change habits? And habits are those things that you habitually do. Again, oftentimes without even questioning them. Because again, it's not the big goals that we go for, right? It's all the micro changes that you're going to be making, those habits that need to change so that you can get ahead. Now, I love to use examples from the fitness world because I think most of us can relate to that. But let's imagine that you have set a goal that you are going to be shredded, right? You are finally going to have that, bikini body or the abs or whatever it is that you said that you want to have. You're going to be shredded. You're going to be in the best shape of your life. But your current habits are not working out, and they're not planning meals, and they're grabbing food on the run, and not always the best food. You know that you get tired and you start to grab for the carbs, right? Some of the classic things that happen. We actually got to make sure that you are building new habits, right? So whatever that is, the working out, the increase in physical activity, perhaps it's the tracking, the macros, all of those things that would come into play so that your habits that you're actually putting in place are aligned with the goals that you want to be achieving. The last place that you want to be looking is your skill sets. Because the reality is perhaps you start to feel overwhelmed with the change because the change is not going to be easy on the face of things, right? Change is by virtue of change, it is inviting you to become a more expanded version of yourself, right? You are going to step up to that next level of yourself. And you are not going to be equipped, right? You're not going to be equipped necessarily with the right mindset, the right habits. We've talked about some of those emotions. The other thing you're not necessarily going to be equipped with is the right skill set. Oftentimes we forget that in order to get to that next level, we've got new skills that we need to increase, we need to improve upon, or perhaps we need to actually become a complete beginner. So one of the places that I'll share with you that comes up, again, I like to use some practical examples in hope that it resonates. A lot of the women that we work with aren't looking at their numbers in business. And they know that in order to take their business to the next level, right, part of being that visionary CEO, as I often call it, is they have to start to become more responsible, right, and overseeing the financial health of their business and not simply abdicating that, by the way, to a CPA or a bookkeeper. And so what does that mean? It means that they actually have to start to look at the numbers in their business. They've got to start to understand, right, what some of those things actually mean. They need to understand what are some of the new skills that would be involved in order to change those numbers. And what's one of the first things that comes up? Fear, right? We can kind of run it through like this template of 5 things that I've just given you. Fear. Oh my gosh, if I look at the numbers, am I going to discover something that's really scary? The fear of judgment that comes up big time, right? What are we going to discover in the numbers? Am I going to be a harsh judge of myself? Do I feel like I'm going to be judged by somebody else by looking at those? Perhaps the overwhelm. Right? The fact that it just feels so new and it feels like you're reading a foreign language, right? All of those feelings can rise to the surface. Certainly, when I think about my limiting beliefs, when it came to looking at the finances, I was holding a limiting belief way back when from school, from very early on, that I wasn't any good at math. And that was because I struggled with it. I struggled with the more complicated stuff. The reality was I was actually really good at basic arithmetic, multiplication, subtraction, and division, all things that are really good in business. Yet I had this limiting belief that I'm no good with math and therefore no good with the numbers, and therefore I don't look at things. Right? So that was where it was coming into play for me. So the habits that I had in place, and again, a lot of the women will share similar things. The habits were, I wasn't in the habit of looking at my numbers. In fact, the habit that I was in the habit of avoiding looking at those things. I was really good at that. And again, if we look now at that 5th place, the skill set, I didn't know what to look for, right? I didn't know how to empower myself. I didn't know the right questions to ask. I didn't know what the reports meant, right? All of those different things around the numbers. So I actually had to start to build that skill set. So we can see where these 5 things just start to get in the way of change. The more you can illuminate them, the more you can be aware of them, you can start to make some different choices. And today you've now got a checklist, right, that you can actually start to work through. Is it fear that's coming up? Is it overwhelm, right? Which one of those is it? How do you actually start to navigate through that? Is it some limiting beliefs that you need to update some scripts that are getting in the way? Or do you need to start to look at your actions and your habits and start to be very, very honest about, are they aligned with my goals, or are they, frankly, competing with my goals? And of course, always be okay with being a beginner again, right? And needing to build up some new skill sets and being okay with that. That is part of the process of change. It's part of that process of living richly on your terms. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review. I'd love to know what resonated, what action steps you're taking, and how this might bring about some positive change for you. And also, don't forget to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. That way you will be sure to catch every episode. I can't wait to see you again soon.